Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're doing well, and I hope you had a good Thanksgiving if you're here in America and you celebrate. But here today, we're finally back inking and coloring that video I made the sketch of, and I did ink it digitally. As if you remember in that video, if you haven't watched it, go check it out. I said if you're seeing this and it is a traditional inking thing, like, I'm inking traditionally, then the digital inking did not go well, but the digital inking, I'm proud to say, did go well. Typically, if you haven't watched one of my videos before, I ink traditionally most of the time, at least over the past year or so. However, with this, fun little piece, I decided to do something a little bit different and go back to my old ways of inking digitally. When I was first learning to draw, like way back in 2019, I started with both technically, but really I inked mostly digitally and drew digitally. It was just like an easy access, the easiest way I could get my hands on drawing at the time. I worked at a place where I used one of those like Wacom tablets, and that's kind of how I learned. I kind of just snuck drawing sessions in while I was at work, and eventually quit that job. This was like a long time ago. But since then, I've been inking digitally off and on, and just when I kind of needed a change of pace. But mostly privately. I haven't really posted much of that stuff just to keep that side of my artistic skill set sharp. I kind of like to be well-rounded, so to speak. Over the past month or so, I've really been thinking about digital inking, and I would say about the past few months, really. The last half of this year. In past videos, I've kind of crapped on digital inking a little bit, at least for myself. If you like it, that's great. And while I still prefer the traditional way after recording this video, I think I did finally find a way to ink digitally that feels right for me. Realistically, if inking digitally is the way you like to do things, there's nothing wrong with it. And I never really thought there was something wrong with it, and if it ever came across that way, I apologize. But what I did to kind of accomplish this task of trying to find a way to make digital inking feel comfortable for me is I tried to do my freaking darndest to recreate my traditional brushes digitally. I primarily recreated my brush pen, my Flex Nib fountain pen, and a fine liner, pretty much like a Micron. These are basically the three primary things that I use to ink that aren't super specialized, and they're used for me like a parallel pen or a big blocky Sharpie or stuff like that. And I accomplished this task of replicating my traditional brushes digitally pretty much by just drawing with those brushes on a piece of paper, scanning it into the computer, bringing that over into Procreate, and just messing with and tweaking the brushes until I got them to look as identical as I could on that piece of paper. The brush pen is kind of the most important of these three and the most difficult to make as well. In this video, you'll also see me use a triangular wedge kind of looking brush and also this soft watercolor brush when I go to shade or render. I'm not gonna really talk about those too much, but I might make a different video on those in the future if you're interested. If you are, let me know down below. But anyway, the versatility of the brush pen really proved a challenge to replicate. It's a tool that can, depending on the brush pen you have, make marks as thin as a fine liner, but also as wide as a big blocky Sharpie, all in one tool. It's partly why the brush pen is my main thing I draw with. It's so versatile. I think I did a pretty good job of replicating its versatility along with its shape and the way it feels pressure-wise to draw with it. You have to have a pretty delicate hand to use a brush pen and learn that muscle memory. The only thing I think I might need to make a separate brush for actually is the brush pen's ability to dry brush, because I could not find a way to get that in with also its the main way it draws, which you're kind of using the point of the brush to make wider thin marks and kind of the wiggliness of it. But if you turn a brush pen on its side and kind of drag it across a piece of paper, you'll get this kind of streaky mark, right? Kind of similar to how you would like turn a pencil on its side. Different effect than obviously a pencil, but the same, I guess, hand placement almost. But I couldn't really replicate that, so I might end up making a separate brush to do that. But something I noticed after battling these pressure curves and figuring out how to make this brush pen feel like a brush pen is also that most inking implements are not actually black. They're shades of gray or really dark gray, which should be obvious because nothing in real life is really black, quote unquote. But I didn't really think about it before doing this with actual ink, because you buy ink, it looks so dark in the ink pot, but it's actually actually like a really dark gray. So in order to accomplish this, I added a very slight bit of transparency to the brush pen. I did this only with the brush pen primarily because with the brush pen you're kind of spreading the ink a bit more than you would with a fine liner or a nib pen or a fountain pen. So because the ink is more condensed, it is actually more of a true black, right? But with a brush pen, because you're kind of like swinging it across a page or spreading it out across a page, it is actually more gray. You don't notice it, when zoomed out and drawing with it, at least, even with the digital brush I made. But if you zoom in or make the brush really big, you do see it, which like I said, you also see with a traditional brush on paper. So I think I really did a pretty good job of replicating that all together. The flex nib and micron, like I said, were much easier to replicate. They're pretty standard, I would say, like inking brushes, just with their own custom variables and thresholds for pressure, tip shape, and texture that I like and appreciate. The thing I think that is impossible to replicate with any digital brush is that physical connection that you have to the paper or whatever medium you're drawing on. This is not to be confused with like, flow state or getting into a flow. You can obviously get into a flow drawing digitally, but there's just some indescribable thing about drawing traditionally for me that, you, or at least I, when I do it, feels so connected kind of to everything. It's just like, I don't know, when I get into a really good flow drawing traditionally, I feel like this almost like consciousness expanding feeling that's kind of indescribable. Maybe that's really weird, and if it is, sorry, I'm so weird. But for me, drawing digitally is very technical. It's more about ironically, replicating traditional techniques that kind of happen naturally. The general consensus among traditional artists is that digital is way easier to do because of the undo button, all the filters and effects and things you can use to manipulate your drawings. But as someone that does and has done both, I can pretty confidently say that at least for me, digital is way more difficult or just as difficult as traditional drawing, just in a different way. There's so much more or really different things to pay attention to with digital. It's more about learning to manipulate a program, I would say, than actually use the tools in the program, that kind of all in one. But I think traditional artists often take for granted how much their traditional tools just do for them. In the digital world, you have to craft the tools themselves in the way you want, or find brush packs and stuff like that to have stuff to do what you want, or you have multiple brushes to do what a single traditional brush can do, kind of like I was talking about earlier with the dry brushing of the brush pen and its ability to kind of be a fine liner and all that stuff. There's so much to learn on both sides. With one, it's more kind of learning yourself and your muscle memory and how to manipulate these physical tools. With the digital stuff, it's more about program manipulation and getting comfortable with the fact that the single stylus or Apple Pencil or whatever you're using is all these brushes, right? It's a paintbrush, it's an inking brush, it's a pencil, all that stuff into one. And in the physical world, in the traditional world, all those brushes feel different, but you're using one tool that feels the exact same to kind of make the effects of stuff in the physical world that feel different. Hopefully that makes sense. But speaking of all that, I have made a Ko-fi, which is an online shop, or Ko-fi, I don't know how you pronounce it. And these inking brushes I made are actually available there. You can click the link below to the Ko-fi if you're interested. They're very cheap. I haven't really done much else with this coffee shop in terms of adding other stuff there, but I'm really planning to do more with it next year in 2025. I have lots of plans for next year. But monetization of art is something that's always kind of scared me and I felt kind of icky about. And to be honest, I don't think I'm very good at it. I'm not really a very business-minded person, mostly because I do this whole art thing not to make money, but just because I love to do it. I kind of just do what I like, and if in the future that leads to something like this, that could be a product, I'll put it up there, but at least that's kind of how I'm looking at it right now. But I hope you liked this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe, tickle the bell, and check out those inking brushes if you're interested, and I'll see you when I see you.